welcome back to 40k. We've got another video for you today. We're going to be talking about the Mephrit Dynasty. So we're going to be talking tactics, we're going to be talking about some units that work well with the Mephrit Dynasty, and strategies that are going to be scoring you some victory points, especially when you're relating them to secondary objectives. So let's first begin with talking about the Dynasty Code itself, and they've got Solar Fury. So what Solar Fury does, it adds 3 inches to all the ranged weapons within your army. However, this will not include your pistols, and you've got to remember the rapid fire range will also be increased because the half range is now increased as well because of that 3 inch. So you get an extra 1.5 inches in rapid fire range. The second part to the Dynasty Code is the fact that you're going to get a -1 AP if you're firing within half range. And that's going to be really good, especially against the new update with Armour of Contempt. So you've got the Space Marines, the Grey Knight, Sisters of Battle, and the variants of the Chaos Space Marines as well. They're going to have that extra AP when you're firing against them, but this will take away some AP if you're firing at half range. The third part to the Dynasty Code is the actual command protocols, which is command protocols of Vengeful Stars. So you get both of the directives with this command protocol. So the first directive is any unmodified wound rolls for 6 will inflict an extra bit of AP, extra -1 AP there. And then directive 2, if you're firing within half range, you're going to remove the benefits of cover. So that will be light cover. So you're dishing out a bit of extra AP with directive 1, and you're potentially removing a bit with light cover in directive 2. So you're going to get both of those with this Dynasty Code. So that's the basics of the Dynasty Code itself. Let's talk about some unique things that relate to this dynasty. So the first thing to think about is the Warlord trait. The Warlord trait associated with this dynasty is the Merciless Tyrant. Now it is a melee based Warlord trait, which is a little bit odd. I'd rather this was in the Novak code, but this is what it does. It basically adds 1 to the strength and attacks for that character model. So for me this works much better in Novak as mentioned, but it is what it is, it's in the Mephrit Dynasty. Now it does work pretty decent when you're adding it to say a War Scythe, because all of a sudden that War Scythe goes from strength 7 to strength 8 with an additional attack on top of that as well. So that's all your Overlord models, your Command Barge, Locust Lords, all those kind of models that can take a War Scythe can now be boosted to strength 8. Now even the Scorpion Lord's Harvester now goes to a strength 9. So that's a real beast, even against toughness 8 models, it's still wounded on a 3+, re-rolling the 1s as well of course with his ability. Now it's also going to work well with generic relics such as the Void Reaper, because that will become a strength 8 weapon, but it will be damage 3, not damage 2 like a War Scythe. It will be damage 3 at strength 8, that is pretty nasty. Then the final relic I wanted to quickly mention here is the Boltite Staff. Now this does work well with the Mephrit Dynasty because it is a shooty weapon, but it's also a melee weapon, and it will now go to strength 7 on an Overlord model again, or a Command Barge, and it can be fired into combat if it is on that barge itself, but strength 7 is pretty decent. So that was the Warlord trait. What about the relic that's associated with the Mephrit Dynasty? So you've got the Conduit of Stars. Now this relates to the Royal Warden because he's got the relic Gorse Blaster, which isn't actually a relic, it's just a relic Gorse Blaster, and this will upgrade to the Conduit of Stars. So what is the Conduit of Stars? It's a 36-inch range weapon, which goes up to a 39-inch range weapon. Don't forget, this is the Mephrit Code. You get +3 to all your ranged weaponry. It's then rapid fire 3, strength 6, -2 AP and 2 damage. So it does have 6 shots at 19.5 inches away, which is a lot of shots when you're talking about strength 6 from just one character model. So that's why it's a pretty decent relic. If you're taking a Royal Warden, I'd always take this relic. It's pretty decent. Even if you've got to spend a command point just to add the relic into your list, it's worth it. So the last unique part of the Mephrit Dynasty is a stratagem. We're going to talk about that in a bit. First I just wanted to talk about some useful units that are going to relate to the Mephrit Dynasty. Now we will go over these in more detail in the tactics section of this video, but I just wanted to list a few now so that you get the idea of what the Mephrit Dynasty is all about. So anything shooty is really going to work in the Mephrit Dynasty. So you've got your Necron Warriors, particularly in 20-man Warrior blobs, you've got your Necron Immortals, whether they're taking the Tesla Carbines or the Gorse Blasters, both of them are going to work pretty decently within the Mephrit Code. Death Marks of course, which have been slightly buffed with the Bodyguard ability being nerfed recently, so they can be taking that with the extra range as well. Tomb Blades, Ghost Arcs, both of them got a pretty decent amount of firepower, especially with the Gorse weapons there. The Locust Destroyers, Locust Heavy Destroyers, the Tesseract Arc, so a lot of people forget about the Tesseract Arc, which is a Forge World model. It's got a pretty decent amount of shooting coming out of that thing, with a little bit of flexibility with its shooting attacks there. The Royal Warden we've already mentioned, and then the last one of course is the Silent King. He's an absolute beast in this dynasty. We will speak about him in particular when we talk about the tactics in a bit. Then you can't forget the heavies in the Codex, the Canoptic Doomstalker and the Doomsday Arc. They work pretty decently in this kind of Dynasty Code if you protect them well enough. You've got to screen them off, but if you can do that, they're going to be doing just great in the Mephrit Dynasty, getting the extra bit of AP and the bit of range on top of that. It's probably one of the best dynasties for them. Okay, so let's go back to that stratagem that we mentioned, which is the Talent for Annihilation stratagem. Now it's 1 command point to use it, and any unmodified wound rolls of a 6 will inflict a mortal wound to a maximum of 3 mortal wounds in that given phase. So I just wanted to break this stratagem down a little bit further, talk about the optimal units that should be using this stratagem, and give you a few statistics on why they should be using it. So if you're talking about warriors with the Gorse Flayers or the Gorse Reapers, it doesn't matter which. If you've got 20 of them, and they're taking 2 shots, so whether it's the Gorse Flayers in rapid fire range or the Gorse Reapers with their 2 shots, they're going to get an average of 27 hits. All that will increase to 33 hits with the My Will Be Done ability on them. That's approximately 4 to 5 wound rolls that will become a 6 on average, so you should easily make that 3 mortal wounds right there. Now even a 10-man unit can almost get the 3. They've got an average of 2.2 to 2.8 mortal wounds, so you can even pull it off with a 10-man unit. That's in rapid fire range. In fact, a 10-man unit is identical to having a Ghost Ark. They're also going to have 20 shots in rapid fire range, so the Ghost Ark could also pull it off as well. Now when you're talking Tomb Blades with the Gorse Blasters, the optimal number here is 7, because they're going to get 19 hits on average with their Gorse Blasters within rapid fire range, and that pretty much is 3 mortal wounds on average right there. If you're taking the Tesla Carbines, you probably only need 5 of them, because on average when you're rolling your wound rolls, you should get about 3.36s there. So that should comfortably get your 3 mortal wounds out of that. So as for the Immortals with the Gorse Blasters, if you've got 10 of them within rapid fire range, 13.3 hits on average, scores about 2.2 mortal wounds on average, so it's not quite enough. So I wouldn't do it on 10-man Immortals with the Gorse Blasters, and with the Tesla Carbines, you're going to get 3.3 mortal wounds on average. So it will work with the Tesla Carbines, not so well with the Gorse Blasters there. So bear that one in mind if you're only taking Immortals. Similarly, if you're taking 6 Locust Destroyers with 18 shots and re-rolling ones, they're going to average 14 hits. So that's going to be 2.3 mortal wounds. Again, not enough for me. You need to be scoring the maximum of 3 on average. So that's the little breakdown of the stats for that stratagem. Warriors, Tomb Blades, Ghost Arks, Immortals with the Tesla Carbines, they're going to roll really well. Now you could argue Death Marks because it will stack with their ability. Any 6s to wound will inflict a mortal wound on top of the damage. So you could be throwing out 2 mortal wounds for every 6 to wound roll you do. That's not the worst thing you can be doing. But Death Marks at the moment aren't the best unit. We've done the video for the Death Marks only recently. In fact, I think it was the last video we did. So if you haven't seen that one already, just check that one out in the playlist. So let's talk some command protocols. I don't normally use command protocols, as you know, and a lot of people really do use them and use them very effectively as well. So we've got to go through them, but there's 4 in particular I wanted to mention with their exact directive as well. So the first one is Protocol of Eternal Guardian. So in Directive 1, each time an attack is made against a unit, if the unit did not move, advance, fall back this battle round, the unit benefits from light cover. So that's not too bad if you're playing a gun line that isn't going to be moving too often. Getting the benefits of cover is pretty decent. Second one I wanted to mention is Protocol of Sudden Storm, Directive 2. The unit can perform an action and still fire its ranged weapons without the action actually failing. So it's really good for your secondary objectives. It could be R&D, for example, raise the banners. We're going to be talking about secondary objectives later in this video, but bear that one in mind if you want to be scoring some points. The third one, Protocol of Vengeful Stars. Now we've kind of already mentioned both of these, but they're going to both work very well. In the Mephrit Code, of course, adding extra AP with Directive 1 or removing the benefits of cover for your opponent with Directive 2. You definitely want to be using both of those as soon as you start shooting. So it kind of depends on the terrain and the shooting lanes. It also depends on what kind of faction you're going up against. Are they going to be an Alpha Strike kind of unit? Are they going to be a slow march up the board kind of unit? So you need to kind of work out where you're going to position that command protocols in your command protocols cards. But I'd like to be using this one as early as possible because that's the Mephrit Code strong point, shooting. So if you're going to be shooting as early as you can, removing models off the board as early as you can, you want to get this command protocol up and running as early as you can. Then the final one worth a mention here is Command Protocol of Conquering Tyrant. So Directive 2, the unit is eligible to shoot in the turn in which it fell back, although it will be at a -1 to hit penalty. So this is like an in-house Royal Warden. You've got it army-wide, providing that you've got a character within 6 inches, of course, because in my opinion, that's why the command protocol is suck. So you can fall back, get your warriors out of dodge, get your immortals out of dodge, let them still fire, rather than being stuck in a melee fight, which they don't really want to be in. Okay, so let's get on to the tactics side of this video. So for me, there is 2 kind of options when you're playing the Mephrit Dynasty. Now the first one is having a full backline gun line. Very stationary, right at the back lines. It's going to require major screening. Scarabs are an absolute must for me. They're going to need to get in front of all your units, all your Doomstalkers, all your Doomsday Arcs. Anything that can shoot your Locust Heavy Destroyers, they're going to need to be shielded by Canoptic Scarab Swarms. That's the cheapest way of shielding them, and you're going to need full units as well, in my opinion. If an Alpha Strike unit comes in or an Orc Boy mob comes in, the new Tyrannus Codex can get in your face pretty early as well. You don't want them getting straight onto your gun line. You want them wasting a turn at least on your Canoptic Scarab Swarm. Now the good points about having this kind of tactic is it's forcing your opponent to come to you, and that's going to get them within half range, especially if they go first. That's an advantage to you. Now it also is going to make a very stubborn defense, as they need to clear your screens before they can actually get to the juicy stuff. Again, all your shooting weapons, your Locust Heavy Destroyers, Canoptic Doomstalkers, etc. Now there are some negatives to this kind of tactic. You're not always going to be making use of the Mephrit Dynasty within -1 to the AP. If you're going up against a mirror kind of list, which is also a shooty list, so you're going up against Imperial Guard, Astra Militarum, Tau, some of those factions like to stay back. They don't need to get up in your face, so they don't need to get within half range in order for you to be using your Dynasty code with the AP. It's also going to be very hard to control objectives that are further out in the field. So if you're going to be staying back all the time, you're going to restrict yourself in terms of secondary objectives. You're not going to be able to do, say, engaging all fronts, behind enemy lines, R&D. Those kind of objectives require you to get forward, out and about, going and exploring the rest of the battlefield. If you're having a gun line that's at the back, you've got less chance of being able to do that. There might be 1 or 2 units that are going to do that, but they'll likely get picked off. And then furthermore, to add to that, you're almost gifting your opponent the primary and secondary objectives that are in their deployment zone, and maybe even the ones that are in the no man's land as well. If you're staying back, you're just inviting them to come into those areas, to take all the objectives, take all the points. Okay, you may be able to shoot them off by, say, turn 3, turn 4, but you may be so far behind them points that it won't matter. Now the second option, which is my preferred option when you're taking the Mephrit Dynasty, is to have a mid-range gunline build. So this is not where you're just staying at the back, you are moving forward. You're moving towards the centre of the battlefield. You're making use of weapons such as the Ghost Reapers from the Warriors, because they're only 12-inch range. You're making use of the Ghost Reapers from the Warriors, for example, because they're only 12-inch range. Or even the Ghost Flayers, they're now going to be within half range to be able to actually fire and get the extra added AP. Now you're still going to require some screening when you're doing this tactic. You might need something a bit more resilient, a bit more robust. So you might need some Canoptic Wraiths, you might need some Lich Guard. Something that's going to be able to actually tank some hits, because they're going to get into a fight a lot sooner than the other option with the backline gun line, because you're going to clash in the middle of the board. So if you're going up against a melee faction, that's going to inevitably happen. So you need to guard your shooty things with some firmer units. You're also likely going to need a Royal Warden to get you guys out of dodge. If you guys get caught up, say again your 20-man warrior blob, if they get caught up in melee, you need to get them out to be using them more effectively with their weapons. They've got the Ghost Flayers, they've got the Ghost Reapers. They're going to be absolutely useless for you if they're within combat. There's no point in being there, they may as well be out and shooting. So we've kind of already discussed the positives with using this tactic. You're going to make more use of the Ghost Flayers, the Ghost Reapers. So you're going to be making more use of the Mephrit Code itself, getting the extra bit of AP. But you're also opening the door to secondary objectives now that are in the mid-table rather than your back lines. You can actually try and force your opponent away from those certain objectives. However, it's going to get quite messy in the centre of the battlefield, especially if you're going up against a melee faction. They're going to start chopping your guys down, and they're even going to springboard consolidate into other units, so you've got to be really careful of that. The last thing you want is a Carnifex to be springing into your Immortals, finishing them off in one go, and then consolidating into a large unit of warriors, making both units virtually redundant from a single charge move. So don't allow any units to springboard. Again, you're going to need some sort of shielding units, Lich Guard, Canoptic Wraiths, Canoptic Scarabs as well, they're going to work just fine. Then furthermore, because you're advancing slightly forward, you're going to be leaving your back lines a bit open. You're not going to have that locked down. So the Alpha Strike units, the Deep Strike units, even flying units, you've got loads of Elder jet bikes and things like that nowadays. They can be getting into your backline, scoring their secondary points, secondary objectives. So you just got to be wary of that too. So that's the two tactics that are deployed with the Mephrit Dynasty code. As for some minor tactics, you've got the Veil of Darkness relic, for example. That's a good place to start. 20 warriors with Ghost Reapers. Now they're not going to get you within half range instantly because you're only going to be 9 inches away. However, you can quite easily remove a unit when you're taking 20 of these guys with the My Will Be Done ability as well. Now there is the argument to take the Ghost Flayers over the Ghost Reapers with the Mephrit Dynasty, and the reason for this, when they use the Veil of Darkness and they get within 9 inches of an enemy model, they're going to get the extra AP because they're within half range, and the half range for the Mephrit Code. So you're getting the same amount of AP, you're not getting the same strength though, you're only getting strength 4, not strength 5. However, if you only need strength 4, That's where the argument comes in. It also depends on what faction you're going up against as well. If you're going up against Toughness 3 infantry, you don't really need the Gorse Reapers with Strength 5. The Gorse Flayers have plenty, you're still going to wound on 3s anyway. Now you don't even need to Veil with an Overlord, you could do it with a Royal Warden just for that extra protection to fall back and still shoot. And don't be afraid to charge with say a unit of warriors as well, because if you've got a Royal Warden with them, they can charge, maybe finish off a unit or at least block them from shooting at your guys, and you're going to be able to get them out within your own turn for them to fire anyway. So don't be afraid to make a charge move. If you've got 20 warriors, that's still 20 attacks at strength 4 at the end of the day. Other methods when you're talking about the Veil of Darkness relic could be the Chronomancer, for example, giving a 5+ invulnerable save to a unit. So 20-man warrior blob, Immortals, Tomb Blades, all those shooter units will definitely benefit from having an invuln save. However, in my opinion, I think a Technomancer is the better option here because they can be bringing D3 warriors back. However, the Technomancer doesn't have his own invuln save, whereas a Chronomancer does. And the Chronomancer on top of that has his own Tropic Lance, so that's a pretty decent strength 8 weapon with D3 plus 3 damage. Other common methods with the Mephrit Dynasty is using a Ghost Ark and having 10 warriors inside the Ghost Ark. In fact, I'd potentially use a couple of Ghost Arks filled with warriors and then use the Veil of Darkness relic to bring out a further 20. Then all of a sudden you've got 40 warriors in their backlines, all with Gorse Reapers or Gorse Flayers depending on what you've chosen, and potentially a larger My Will Be Done buff on most of those units. Now I personally like to use the super combo when I'm using warriors, so you've got your Canoptic Reanimator, you've got the Ghost Arks, you've got the Resurrection Orbs, the Technomancers, and you just make a giant fort within the centre of the battlefield, and they're just constantly healing each other, resurrecting each other, reanimating each other, and it's just an absolute nightmare for your opponent to get rid of this combination. One of my personal favourites there, works in most dynasties, especially when you're warrior heavy, and double especially works when you've got Investigate Signal as your secondary objective. If you can squeeze those warriors in, of course, you're going to be absolutely taking over that area of the board. They're not going to be removing you. Now a big mention when you're talking about the tactics for the Mephrit Dynasty is involving the Silent King. Now he can't gain the buffs directly because he's a dynastic agent, but the buffs he can be given units within the Mephrit Dynasty are very powerful. So of course he's stacked with abilities, but 5 of them are going to work really well. The first one being Relentless March, of course, getting that +1 to the movement of all your core units. That's kind of standard for a noble type model. Now this doesn't just work with core units, it also works with Triumph Praetorian, so if you're taking those guys, that's going to work wonders as well. He's then got the Fair on ability, so we can use the My Will Be Done ability twice, so of course that's the next one, My Will Be Done. That's going to work again on core units and Triumph Praetorian units. That's going to be a +1 to their hit rolls, whether it's at range or in melee. Then the 2 unique aura abilities, so you've got Fair Run of Stars. So while a core unit or the Triumph Praetorians are within 6 inches of the Silent King, any range attacks are going to get to re-roll their hit rolls. So they're already hitting on 2s with the My Will Be Done ability, and then re-rolling everything effectively. They're going to almost get every hit there. Then likewise, they've got the Fair Enough Blades aura ability, again used on core units or Triumph Praetorian units. In melee, they get to re-roll their wound rolls. Now this isn't really a melee type of dynasty, but if you did manage to find your units within a fight, maybe your Lich Guard that are defending your backline or your Canoptic Race for example, then don't forget this one with the Silent King. So what are the tactics we got with the Mephrit Dynasty? Now I wanted to mention use of a Catan Shard. Now it could be any of the Catan Shards, preferably for me it's going to be the Nightbringer or perhaps it's going to be the Void Dragon. Now they're not as good as they used to be, however they are going to be a huge distraction. Now your opponent is going to have no choice but to deal with the Catan Shard. Again, whether it's a Nightbringer, Void Dragon or the other ones, they've got no option, they have to deal with this model because otherwise it's going to cause absolute chaos within their entire army. So they need to deal with it, and it will inevitably die. However, it should hopefully take out an equal amount of points in their list as it costs itself. So if it's 370 points, for example, it should roughly take out that amount from their army. Again, if you're playing against a Tyrannid, it might take out a Maleceptor and a buttload of Gene Stealers, or if you're going up against Eldar, it might take out a Wraith Knight. You just don't know what it's going to take out. Depends on who you're going up against. But the main point of why I'm mentioning this is going to be distracting your opponent from taking out all the shooter units within your list. It's effectively giving your gun line a free pass for 1, maybe even 2 turns. So again, if you've got Doomstalkers, Doomsday Arcs, Heavy Locust Destroyers, they shouldn't really be getting targeted when there's a Catan Shard of the Nightbringer flying up the board, looking to slice open their entire army. So that's what they're going to be dealing with first, giving you more time to shoot, more time to use your actual Dynasty code with that extra AP. That's the whole point of this, you need to make the absolute most of your actual Dynasty codes. Okay, so now we're on to the video where we talk about what secondary objectives are going to work well with the Mephrit Dynasty. So anything that holds your opponent back is going to work well for you because you don't want them advancing towards your gun line, especially if they're a melee faction. So something like Purge the Vermin, for example, will keep them back in their quarters. Okay, they do have to advance into your quarters as well, but they're not going to do it with their entire army because they do need to keep their own quarters held. So Purge the Vermin could be an option as one of your secondaries there. Other ones could include ancient machineries behind enemy lines, engage on all fronts, R&D perhaps. Now these do come at a risk because they're forcing you to come out. However, if your opponent has to defend those areas so that you don't score them, they're less likely going to be coming towards your gun line. So this is more of a tactical play. You might not score all your secondaries, however it could prevent them from coming towards your gun line as mentioned, which you don't want to lose your gun line if you're playing Mephrit. So if you start selecting secondaries that invite your opponent onto your backlines, then likely what's going to happen is your shooter units are going to get caught in melee, making them absolutely redundant. Although you will score some early points, turn 1, turn 2 you should be scoring quite comfortably. However, some of the secondaries don't even work turn 1 anyway, so you're just gifting them time to come towards your backlines. That becomes a problem. Now mid-ground objectives such as investigate signal, teleport homers, raise the banners, they will play into your hands, especially for the added AP that you want to be using with your Dynasty code. But again, it's only going to favour you for 1 or 2 turns at best, because now they're going to be within range to make a charge move. Which is why screening in the Mephrit Dynasty is probably the most important factor of your actual list. If you've not got a screen within the Mephrit Dynasty, you're playing the Mephrit Dynasty wrong in my opinion. So guys, that about wraps up the Mephrit Dynasty from me today. If you've got anything you want to add, just put it in the comments below. I'm sure there's going to be plenty more little bits of tactics from, say, the command protocols, for example, that you might want to add. Some bits of synergy as well. Put it down below in the comments for us all to see. So other than that, guys, all that's left to say, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.